It is not Wednesday, my dudes, which means it is time for another First Thoughts and Initial Impressions Epic 7 video. This one will be on Brieg, the newest 5-star that was just shown over on YouTube, as well as a new 4-star named Veronica. Gotta say, Smilegate, not a super big fan of you guys releasing these trailers late at night on a Wednesday now, because even if I managed to just work all night and get the video out, it would still technically be Thursday in most parts of the world, and therefore the joke is basically ruined. So, yeah, you guys are just killing my whole vibe here on this video series. Please go back to Wednesday morning reveals. I'm begging you. That said, I will still talk about my 2 cents on both of these characters. Do I think they're good? Where I'd play them? What kind of gear I'd use them on? What kind of artifacts? All that stuff you've come to expect from my First Thoughts and Initial Impressions video series. With the intro out of the way, let's take a look at Brieg's S3 animation.
The path I walk is dictated by me alone, and I will follow it, even into darkness. I have no mercy to spare for your reckless greed. Your suffering is self-inflicted.
Okay, so Brieg's S3 animation is definitely another one we can add to the pile of just absolutely insanely gorgeous looking animations that Smilegate and Super Creative have been putting out this year. It's right up there at Last Piece Corinne and Requiem Rwanda for one of the best ones I've seen all year. And I have no doubt when we talk about Shu in a couple of weeks, that one's also probably going to make that list. Just absolutely stunning quality coming out of the studio lately. As for voice actor trivia in the English dub of Epic 7, Brieg is voiced by a veteran of the industry in Jason Spisak. If you've been watching anime for a long time, if you're a boomer like myself, you may have heard him as the voice of Kiyomaru Takamine, the main character of Zatchbell or Gashbell, depending on which region you actually watched it in. And if you're not an anime boomer, then you probably have heard his voice as Silco in the amazing League of Legends Arcane. Moving on to Brieg's stats, he is an Ice Knight of the Aries zodiac symbol, which means he shares a stat line with Red Lilius, Red Cecilia, Blue Tywin, and the ML 5-star Bellion. It is a personal favorite of mine, despite the fact that for some reason the stat line is just strictly worse than its 4-star counterpart. Hey, Smilegate and Super Creative, if you're watching the video, probably look into that, because again, for some reason, all of the 5-star Aries Knights just have strictly worse stats than the 4-star Aries Knights. Looking at the actual stats itself, attack is 821, health is 6,751, speed is 110, defense is 648, critical hit chance and critical hit damage are base values at 15% and 150% respectively, dual attack chance is 3%, and effectiveness is 18% with no starting effect resistance. Imprint release is health for the team, and concentration is health for the team, which is expected for a bruiser and or a knight. Overall, I really do like this stat line for its starting effectiveness. One of the highest, if not the highest, base speed value for a knight. I believe only specialty change knights have higher speed than this actual stat line. And the health is pretty good at 6,751, and the defense is respectable at 648. So again, it's just a pretty overall balanced stat line, and I really, really like it. Again, like I said, it's my favorite one in the entire game. Jumping into it, let's take a quick look at Brieg's skills, starting with his S2, which is Spirit Lord's Protection. You acquire 50 Fighting Spirit upon use, as well as 2 souls, and it has a 4-turn cooldown. It grants a barrier to all allies for 3 turns, as well as the Perception buff to the caster for 3 turns, grants an extra turn to the caster, barrier strength increases proportional to the caster's max health. You could soul burn it for 10 souls to increase the strength of the barriers. Remember, Perception gives you 15% critical hit chance and critical hit damage in case you forgot. Taking a look at Brieg's S3, it is limitless sword arts. You acquire 2 souls upon use, and it has a 5 to 6 turn cooldown depending on Malagora. It is a single target attack that dispels all buffs from the target before decreasing defense and speed of that target for 2 turns. Increases the effectiveness of this attack by 50%. Damage dealt increases proportional to the caster's max health. Finally, his skill 1 is Shadow Swordsmanship. You acquire 25 Fighting Spirit upon use. Attacks the enemy and increases the combat readiness of Brieg by 15 to 20% depending on Malagora. Damage dealt increases proportional to the caster's max health. After attacking, when Fighting Spirit is full, consumes all Fighting Spirit to dispel all debuffs from Brieg and activates his S3, Limitless Sword Arts, against the enemy with the highest attack. So now that we've done a once over of the skills, let's table back and talk about them in more detail. First, let's revisit the S2, Spirit Lord's Protection. You get the 50 Fighting Spirit to get the ball rolling, which I think is really, really good, as opposed to just having things say, like, at the start of the first battle. So, yeah, this one I think is a little bit more preferable. The extra turn is really nice as well, because the skill just really doesn't have any cost. You just use it up front when it's Brieg's first turn, or if it's off of cooldown, and that's just super, super good for our turn cycling, getting our cooldowns down, getting our Fighting Spirit up. Obviously, you're not going to use it until like Barrier Inversion or things like Operator Cigarette or Veronica. That's kind of the obvious hard counters to this character are things like that. But it's still really, really good, right? Having barriers, I think, gives this character a lot of flexibility in his builds because he's very clearly meant to be a bruiser, a DPS. But with the barriers, I think you could justify trying Aureus on the character if you wanted to go that route. Currently, Last Rider Crow is a character that I don't particularly think Aureus is very good on, but it's hard to fit Aureus characters into your draft because your draft has to be very flexible, and it can't go too slow, so you can't be drafting Aureus at the end, or you just get blown out by something like Straze Laika. So having a character that can hold Aureus, even if they're not the best user of it, is pretty good, and the barriers do mitigate the damage share from Aureus, so I really do like that option on the character, even though I think that's not the way that most people will play him. Barriers are also really good because it does protect this character from injury. He's a health scaler, and injury is not everywhere, but it is still kind of common, and he's very vulnerable to it, so having something in the kit that can help mitigate potential injury is always going to be super, super welcome in my book. Looking at the S3, Limitless Sword Arts, this thing is actually really strong. Even though it's only single target and it has a really long cooldown, it's, again, really strong. We're in a metagame where everything is kind of a cleanser or, like, puts up immunity, so you can't really get to things. Or you have characters like Navy Captain Landy that have critical hit resistance. It's hard to punch through some of the characters in today's metagame unless you are just very aggressive or you play like a lot of tank busters, like Architect Laika, for example. It's hard to penetrate some of these teams that people are playing in Standard. Having a full strip on a single target while also giving them a not one turn but 2 turn defense break and slows them to potentially allow your team to catch up and cut in front of them, really, really strong. You can just have Brieg use this, set up a character, like use it on, say, either Navy Captain Landy or Lionheart Sirmia, which are fairly commonly played characters right now. And again, it just sets them up to just be killed by another DPS right off the rip. Especially a character like Lionheart. Even if that character doesn't die right away, the defense break is pretty strong. The increased effectiveness will actually help also for that character because a lot of Lionhearts have around 100 to like 130 ER, I feel like, nowadays, including the buff, obviously. So having the effectiveness does help us out a lot in making sure that we can actually get through and mess up that character and kind of set up for a kill. I keep saying set up, by the way, because I don't really feel like Brieg is a solo DPS. He feels like an off DPS with some utility with the barriers. I don't think you could play this character as a primary damage dealer. Like, he can't be the only thing. Like, you can't have like Mediator and like Arwell and Destina or like Shuna and then this guy. I just don't think that will work. His cooldowns are a bit too long, and even though we haven't seen the multipliers, I just don't think that the rate at which this character is going to deal damage is enough for you. I do think that he's somebody you have to draft in a like 2 tank / support draft along with 3 DPS. Like, that's the only real way I could see him actually getting some value. Yeah, looking at everything else on Limitless Swords, the long turn cooldown does kind of suck, but again, it's pretty powerful. And we talk about the S1, you guys already know that it has the component that allows us to use it off of cooldown as well. It's, again, very strong and makes me think that if he has good multipliers, this character could definitely bring something to the table for World Arena and possibly even things like Guild War offense. Wouldn't surprise me if he's on Guild War defense as well, but I think he's a bit more vulnerable there, and characters like Shu and Senya I think are a little bit harder to deal with, and honestly a little bit more sacky, a little bit more high rolly. Moving on to the S1, Shadow Swordsmanship. Obviously, 20% combat readiness built in is very good. We talk about 15% being the standard at this point. And when we talked about Navy Captain Landy last week, that was like 25, I believe. That was kind of like way above rate. So 20 is definitely above the average, but not ludicrous. That's pretty good. Obviously, full fighting spirit, we get to use limitless sword arts, which is kind of the big draw to the skill. And you'll notice that it doesn't have a restriction about the fact that it needs to be your turn when fighting spirit is full, which should just send every bell in your head ringing. This character is obviously going to be built on counter set and possibly even like Unity to maximize the rate at which you get fighting spirit, so you can just kind of spam limitless sword arts. Since he's a knight as well, you can put Elbrus Ritual Sword on him, and that will do big work, I feel like, for him. The problem is we're at a point where I feel like every knight really wants Elbrus that's like playable that's not a tank. So you have like Landy needs Elbrus, Bellion needs Elbrus, Ilanav needs Elbrus, Green Armin, if you want her for the anti-cleave, needs Elbrus. Like, everyone feels like they need Elbrus Ritual Sword right now, and there's just not enough of that artifact to go around unless you're like a Giga Whale. So that lends us back to what we're talking about earlier with Arius. I could definitely see people trying to play Brieg on Arius because they simply just don't have another Elbrus Ritual Sword laying around. It's definitely something we're trying. But because you can get limitless sword arts off of Shadow Swordsmanship, this character just feels like a slam dunk counter set character. We have to see the multipliers on him, but I do think that this character is someone you can try out in Guild War offense, somebody you can definitely try out in Arena and also World Arena. He definitely seems like a PvP character. They obviously show him in the video also doing Pain Pursuer Moroi, which, yeah, he's probably optimal there because Cecilia is the only other good option right now, and she's not exactly the best. You are playing her because she is a defense breaker with a strip and a slow. So Brieg has the strip. You already play other characters that have slow on that team anyway, like Cerise. And he does good damage with the defense break, so he's probably going to survive longer, I feel like, than Cecilia. So, yeah, if nothing else, Brieg is worth picking up because he's probably going to end up being the optimal tank for Pain Pursuer Moroi. So if you're somebody who's trying to play PvE optimally, then definitely consider picking up Brieg for that. The one thing that you have to note about Brieg is that we have potentially a limited character coming very soon with the artwork Lilius that won. So you may want to hold off on your bookmarks and not pull for this character and save for that limited, because eventually you probably will be able to get this character from things like Story Summon or like a Selector. That said, he seems like, to me, somebody that is worth trying to pick up. We will have to see how he is once he actually comes out, once we actually see those multipliers. Before we wrap up talking about Brieg and start talking about Veronica, let's quickly talk about his artifact, Broken Will of the Priest. Increases hit chance by 10 to 20% based on artifact level. When attacking, penetrates the target's defense by 8 to 16% based on artifact level. I think it's a fine artifact. I just think that most knights in the game right now really want either Elbrus Ritual Sword or Arius. There's definitely probably a case to be made to use this artifact somewhere at some point on someone. But for right now, I think it's a skip. We just have so many strong artifacts for knights right now in the pool. And again, the ones that want damage, they probably are going to want Elbrus Ritual Sword. So I just don't know where we'd actually put this thing. This feels like a solid artifact that's just kind of here. And if you pull it, I guess you can potentially use it, especially if you're like a PvE player and don't really care about Elbrus Ritual Sword. But again, just feels like it's a skip. So that's pretty much my thoughts on Brieg. Let's jump over to the other character that was shown yesterday, which is the 4-star ranger, Veronica.
I'm Veronica, captain of the Slayers. Do whatever I have to for a better tomorrow. Nice work, everyone.
Alright, so while I think Veronica's animation is great, for some reason the preview video audio is pretty loud and distorted, and so that's kind of a major knock, I think, against the preview video. Hopefully next time they catch this before they actually upload it, because it's really loud, and I hope that that's not the actual in-game quality of the voice, because I really want to hear more from this voice actress, which is Ashley Blanchett. That's who voices Veronica in Epic 7. She appears to be a stage actress for the New York Broadway, as well as an accomplished singer. Currently, she plays Elsa in the New York Broadway version of Frozen, which is obviously a very popular Disney movie. Moving on to Veronica's stats, she is a Fire Ranger of the Virgo zodiac symbol, which means she shares a stat line with Silk. Taking a look at her stats, she has 1,188 attack, 4,693 health, 121 base speed, 518 defense, 15% critical hit chance, 150% critical hit damage, 3% dual attack chance, and no effectiveness or starting effect resistance. Imprint release for the team is 10 speed, which is massive, and imprint concentration is 14.7% critical hit chance, which is also massive. So, Veronica is a very fast character, same base speed as Conqueror Lilius, meaning you can realistically get this character to like 300 or 310 speed at the top end. And she also happens to have imprint release of 10 speed for the team, which is incredibly valuable. It's definitely going to make her see, I feel like, play in World Arena, regardless of what the actual kit is. It's a fast character that gives speed to the team. That is always useful for anyone in a speed contest scenario or for dedicated cleavers. So regardless of what the kit does, I think Veronica is going to see play just because of that imprint release, because it's so rare and it is so powerful and impacts games even at the highest level in Epic 7. Let's move on to her actual kit, starting with her S2 passive, Vampire Hunter. At the start of the turn, dispels immortality from all enemies, ignores effect resistance. At the end of someone's turn, when the enemy is granted immortality, increases the combat readiness of the caster by 15 to 20%, depending on Malagora. Her S3 is Chain Explosion. You acquire 3 souls upon use, and it has a 4 to 5 turn cooldown, depending on Malagora. Attacks the enemy, dispelling 2 buffs before inflicting decreased defense, so defense break, and gives them a bomb for 2 turns. A critical hit on this move will grant an extra turn. Soulburn effect consumes 20 souls to ignore effect resistance. And finally, her basic skill is Rapid Fire. Attacks the enemy by shooting and increasing the combat readiness of the ally with the highest combat readiness, except for the caster, by 10 to 15%, depending on Malagora. At the end of the turn, detonates a bomb effect if it is inflicted on the target. Now that we've talked about all the skills very quickly, let's table back and talk about them in more detail. The first one I want to talk about is her passive, Vampire Hunter. I think this thing is a slam dunk flavor win. Veronica herself is a Vampire Hunter. Most of the vampires that we have in Epic 7 right now have immortality. Yes, there's a couple of other stragglers like Kairon, Spirit Isolene, that have immortality. Sure, it's fine. The thing is, it's a Vampire Hunter who is specifically meant to play against the Vampire Hunters in the team, and it's a pretty nice perk. It gets rid of the survivability perk that most vampires have so far as their gimmick in Epic 7, and she gets a nice CR boost on top of that to boot. I think it's so cool to go into Episode 5, give your player base a free character that's good against vampires, essentially, and then hopefully, if they do this right, a lot of characters coming out of Episode 5 should be vampires with immortality. So Veronica, the free character you gave to players, might not seem good now, but as more vampires come out, the character gains more value. Like, what if the girl from Abigail's side story is a playable character and she has immortality and she's like supremely meta? Then Veronica gets more value. On top of that, the final boss, the Vampire Lord, maybe that is what he is, the final boss. Maybe he's the big bad of the series. He's the ML5 we get at the end of Episode 5. What if he's based entirely around immortality? Then Veronica, the Vampire Hunter, gains more inherent value. And from the looks of her preview video, she will have more friends. Hopefully they are also Vampire Hunters with similar flavorful mechanics. If that's the case, then that is like a huge kudos to the design team, because I think it's really cool when a character's like lore matches up perfectly with their gameplay, and that's exactly what I feel like when I see this passive skill in Vampire Hunter. It is so cool to see story overlap with actual gameplay mechanics in a game. I am a huge, huge fan of that every time I see it. Going back to Chain Explosion here, the S3, it's just good. It's not as good, I think, as Brieg's S3, which is a full strip into a defense break and a slow. This is a minor strip into a defense break and a bomb. which is pretty good because you have the potential to get the extra turn. So you could go chain explosion, defense break, and bomb a character, take an extra turn, and then just immediately detonate it with her skill 1 rapid fire, which I think is really strong. Depending on the damage multipliers on Veronica and how high you could get her actual attack, this could outright kill a lot of squishies. Like I could see certain like low health characters just instantly dying to this. Even like Lionheart Sirmia, who's traditionally pretty weak against bombs, could also just like insta die to chain explosion into the rapid fire S1. That's really, really good. You could tell by the way that they are learning from their mistakes, I guess. I don't want to necessarily call it mistake, but they are learning about how the players use the tools that are already in the game, because Star of the Deep Sea would obviously want to go on a character with bombs, but that's only when you land a non-critical strike. By adding a critical hit will grant an extra turn, you reduce this character's ability to just like insta-kill a lot of characters in the game, because if you get this character's attack like sky high through like an attack buff and just build her naturally with a lot of attack, defense breaking a character, giving it 2 bombs, and then immediately detonating it with a second attack coming into it with a extra while they're already defense broken, that kills a lot of like non-tank, non-bruiser characters just outright in the game, which would be very strong for a 4-star. So I'm glad that they recognize that. They gave us the really broken soul burn that's not extra turn, 20 souls to ignore effect resistance. On a single target, I'm not, I don't hate this that much. I think it's actually fine. I said the same thing with Architect Leica. Having the ignores effect resistance on the soul burn for the thing is fine. It's a character that probably needs it to do the job. I have a big problem when it is an AoE ignore effect resistance for 20 souls. I feel like AoE ignores effect resistance should be 30 souls, if I'm being real with you. I think that would be a nice fix for those kinds of characters, because AoE ignores effect resistance is usually just like a death sentence. Going back to rapid fire here again, it's got a detonate on it, which means it's very strong with the S3. Good with other bomb characters like Flan, for example, you might want to pair her with, or like Summertime Assyria. The other thing, combat readiness, 15% for somebody on the team is pretty good. It's no hand guy S1, it's no mediator Coeric S1, it's not retribution, that's for sure. But traditionally, the extra combat readiness is pretty nice. So for as to how we play Veronica, right, she's not going to have the bulk to do a counter set to really take advantage of rapid fire, which kind of relegates her to just leaning into her 121 base speed. So you're probably going to end up playing her on, speed set, possibly unity set, hit set, crit hit chance set. Like, these are the things I'm expecting for you to play on this character. Necklace is definitely, I feel like, a critical hit chance necklace, so that way you don't have to waste too much stats on critical hit damage. This character doesn't seem like somebody you'd need critical hit damage on. We're really just trying to make sure that we land our bombs, land our debuffs, make sure that we're fast so that we can do that, and then obviously land our critical hit. As for artifacts, not really sure on this one. Guiding Light is a premium one. That might end up being the case if this character, is really good, but again, not many people have a ton of Guiding Lights just laying around. I could see potentially trying like Wall of Order after its changes, which gives the barrier at the end of each turn, as well as the gap. If you get greater attack buff, that bomb that you put on somebody with the S3 is absolutely going to just destroy somebody. So that's definitely an option. And then you have other ranger options like your Rosa Hargana to like increase your dual attack chance. Like, so maybe you could get some cheeky combat readiness push up if you get really lucky. Like, I could see like somebody trying Speed Unity, Rosa Hargana, and just kind of like getting a lot of dual attacks for a lot of extra combat readiness. That could be kind of cool, something to consider. But overall, I think it's going to be either like Guiding Light or maybe Wall of Water. I believe also Nadalon Monk, her artifact that we got from that one side story, might be pretty decent. I don't remember the exact effects off the top of my head, but I remember that is something that's traditionally played with bomb-based characters. You guys can let me know down in the comments below if I messed up and it requires you to not land a critical strike, just like with Star of the Deep Sea. But that's another thing to consider. Overall, the biggest takeaway with Veronica is that she's got a pretty cool flavor win in her passive, and she has the potential to delete a character while also having probably the second best team imprint in the entire game behind Vildred at 10 speed. So that's pretty much why you're going to want to have a Veronica and have her actually geared, is if you actually are somebody who tries to go fast in speed contests. If you play fast in World Arena, then yeah, definitely get on Veronica, definitely build the character, definitely look for some imprints and get her leveled as soon as possible, because you probably will see her in cleave mirrors or aggro mirrors at some point. So those are my thoughts on Brieg and Veronica. Let me know down in the comments below if you agree or disagree, or if I missed anything or made any mistakes as always. I will have a RGB 5-star selector video for the anniversary coming sometime very soon. It's either going to be tonight or later tomorrow morning, so please stay tuned for that. And there's also going to be a giveaway along with a video covering Nike, Goddess of Victory, at some point, because I'm a huge Nier Automata fan and they're collabing with that, and that was my Dream Epic 7 collab. Yeah, it's a lot. So hopefully you'll stay tuned to the channel. As always, enjoy the rest of your day, the rest of your week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye now.